All right, welcome everyone. And today, Asian philosophy meetup. Okay, we will talk about Kumarajiva and the Chinese Buddhism. All right. So before that, let me go through the schedule. I have a few changes on the schedule. So I kind of lay out the schedule up to the October. So today we will talk about the Chinese. Today we will talk about Chinese Buddhism, and the person we were going to introduce is Kumarajiva. And a lot of people may not recognize how important he is. And then next week, we are going to continue to follow the book from Feng, A Short History of Chinese Philosophy, talking about the Zen Buddhism. Even his translation called Chen, basics, the I should not say proper name, but basic, the popular name is Zen Buddhism. And in September 10th, we're going to introduce Xuanzang. Okay, that's the one James just talking about, and Alex is interested on is Xuanzang. And then 17th, we will talk about Vedanta, okay, free will and determination from SK, okay, so Hindu philosophy, which is continuous from the last week discussion. And then I'm going to introduce, since we're moving through the history, and then we are now in about the 6th, 7th century, which is Tang Dynasty. So on the last week of September, I'm going to introduce the background of the Tang Dynasty, which is very interesting dynasty, and the Buddhism is important in this dynasty, and the Xuanzang is live in this dynasty. And October, Alex is going to talk about the art and the philosophy of Chinese calligraphy. Okay. So I believe she will talk about the person. His name is Wang Xizhi, and who lived during the same period of time we will mention about. We will mention about his daughter, I think. Okay, so so that's the schedule. Okay. And then, so today we will talk, the subject is Chinese Buddhism and Kumarajiva. So two things I'd like to make it clear. Okay, that's constantly being confused. Okay, so Chinese Buddhism is different than Buddhism in China. Okay, let's put this one. I think Feng Youlan's book make it clear. Chinese Buddhism basics is talking about the religion, Buddhism religion in China, which basically is Mahayana Buddhism. Buddhism in China basically is talking about Xuanzang, bring the Buddhism from India to China, which is written in Chinese, but this or has no Chinese flavor. So that's the two things, okay, it's different. And the two persons constantly got confused is Kumarajiva and Xuanzang. Kumarajiva is 200 years earlier than Xuanzang. Kumarajiva is, and technically his father is from Kashmir, okay, India, northern India, and then he was born in the kingdom of Kucha, and he traveled to China and did a lot of translation. Okay, that's Kumarajiva. He is not Chinese in race. Okay, Xuanzang, 200 years later, is a Chinese monk. His last name is Chen. Okay, he was born in China and become a monk. He just kind of like today's foreign student. He traveled all the way to India to become a scholar, Buddhism scholar, and bring a lot of sutra back to China and to the and work on the translation. So that's the two persons are different, and a lot of people constantly make mistake. So that's why I want to make it clear here. So right now, I think we can start, and then so basically I have 6 subjects to talk about. Okay, so basically first I will give a brief introduction about Buddhism, because since I haven't talked about Buddhism since this year I haven't talked any about Buddhism. So then I will talk about the teaching of Mahayana Buddhism. Then I will give a brief introduction on the history background, Kingdom of Kucha, which is a metropolitan city or a state along the Silk Road. Then I will introduce the person, Kumarajiva. Then we will talk about Chinese Buddhism. Okay, and then we talk about the influence or importance of Chinese Buddhism, which were considered being established by Kumarajiva. So that's today's subject, and then I will pause for 1 minute if you have any question or any concern. No? Okay, so I will move on. Okay, let me introduce Buddha, and most of people probably already know, but if you don't know, I just provide some basic information. I'm not going to give a detailed information, but if you are interested, and one day I will make up a special meetup session to just talk about Buddhism, philosophy, or religion. So just give a brief introduction about Buddha, the person. Okay, so basically he was born, I think he is 12 years older than Confucius. Okay. Confucius was born at 551 BC, and he was, I think he's 12 years old, if it's correct. And actually he, technical speaking, he is Nepalese, okay, not Indian, the Lumbini province in Nepal. And his family name is Gautama. That's a lot of people know. And he has a first name is Siddhartha. And he doesn't have a birthday. Okay, it's April 8th. If you are a Buddhist, usually you will celebrate on the April 8th as the birth of Buddha. But it's based on the lunar calendar, not based on the Western calendar. And usually Buddha is a common name we call, and which means the enlightened person, the one who enlightened. And in the Buddhist Sutra, many times he has been called with different titles. I didn't list all of them, but I just list the one important in Chinese Buddhism. One is Tathagata, okay? And the very popular name is Rulai. A lot of people translate just direct. Tathagata is a Sanskrit name and it means thus comes one. Okay, so I think thus comes one is a good name. Okay, to translate from Rulai. Okay, so that's the very popular name in Chinese writing. And another one is Bhagava or Bhagavan, which means the blessed one. If you read the Diamond Sutra, and usually they will call him Bhagava. Okay. And another popular name is Shakyamuni. And Shakyamuni means he is the sage of the Shakya clan, because the kingdom, he was born as a prince. So the kingdom, the clan name is Shakya. So that's why sometimes he called Shakyamuni. So that's his name. And let's give a few about his life. Okay. So I think it's interesting to compare him with Jesus. So if you look at, he was born at 563 BC, and he was born as a prince. And I think after 7 days, his birth, his mother died, and then his aunt, who is also his mother's younger sister, taking care of him. So he was born in the royal family, unlike Jesus was born as the son of carpenter and in the manor. So that's a difference. Okay. So at 35 years old, and the Buddha got enlightened. Okay, the story is he lived in a wonderful life, comfortable life, but one day he went out. He realized, a lot of people suffer. So he started to think about this kind of situation, and a lot of questions he need to know. I need the answer. So he went out, become the ascetic monk, and then when he was 35 years old, he sit under the Buddha tree and start to understand. Okay, and he got enlightened, and then he start to preach his teaching. Okay, so same as Jesus, but his life is much longer, right? So same as Jesus, his teaching, and when he reached 80 years old, he died. Okay, and at that time he already very famous, and a lot of disciples surrounded, and he died peacefully. Unlike Jesus, died at 33 years old, got crucified. But they have the same result. Jesus had the resurrection, and then Buddha reached the nirvana. Okay, basically get out of the samsara. You don't have to be reborn. That's the difference. So that's a brief introduction of Jesus, not Jesus, Buddha's life, and which we call this religion, okay, Buddhism. Same as we call whoever believes Jesus as God, we call this religion Christian. Before we introduce the teaching of Buddhism, we need to give a brief understanding of Hinduism, which Buddhism built on, just like Christian is built on the Judaism tradition. So Hinduism tradition during that time, there's something Buddha is not going to argue against, which used as a foundation, right? So something called Dharma, which is the method, or if you talk about in Taoism teaching, is the Tao, okay, the way, okay, the Dharma. Okay. Asa means you have the meaning, and you have the sense, you have the goal of the essence. Karma is you have the desire, and which you also consider as the cause. Okay. And moksha, liberation, you have to escape from this. That's the basics Hinduism philosophy, and probably that nobody going to deny this, same as Buddhism is not going to deny all this concept. And the samsara is another concept. It's also built in because people will get reborn. Okay, so after you die, and depending on how you did in this life, and you will reborn in next life, and then you will have different life. Okay, so again and again. So whatever you escape from the this samsara, you will reach nirvana, or you want to call it moksha. So that's the basic understanding, okay, during the Buddha's time, and probably for all the Indian-born religion, all have this one, including Hinduism, Jainism, Sikh, and Buddhism, all agree on this part. So there's no difference. Yeah. And the difference is start from here, when Buddhism start to teach it. No matter which school, and the Buddha himself as teaching is Four Noble Truths, which is dukkha, that's the truth of suffering, and samudaya, and that's the truth of the cause of suffering. and the Nirodha, which is the truth of the end of suffering, and Magga, which is the truth of the path. So that's the Four Noble Truths. All the Buddhism are not going to deny, doesn't matter which school, that's the foundation. And you can look at is they all view this world, this life is suffering. And suffering doesn't mean you really painful, it means you are never satisfied. Okay, you eat and then you have to eat again, you'll be hungry. Same as sex. After sex, then you're never satisfied. You want to do it again and again. So that's called suffering. And the cause of suffering is the dharma, the karma you have. So he talked about the cause, and you want to reach the final goal. Okay, and in the Buddhism teachings, nirvana, okay, you want to get out of this cycle, and they have the way to reach it. So you can look at the answer of what is today's life, where is the life coming, the suffering coming from, and how do we end this, where is this life going to, and how do we take care of this life? So it comes with 8 noble eightfold paths. Okay, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, right mindfulness. And each one have the detailed instruction how to do it, and each one have a detail. It depends on which school and how are you going to focus on that. A lot to talk about this. So that's just the basic Buddhism teaching, and then doesn't matter which school. And in today, we can roughly talk about Buddhism has 3 major schools. Some people will say, oh, they have the more, and some people will say, but let's make it clear. Okay, we make it roughly 3 major schools. One is Theravada, okay, and sometimes called Hinayana, okay, that means little vehicle. But I think the proper name should be Theravada, which means the teaching of the elder, and is, or you want to call it the Southern Buddhism, mainly dominates in Sri Lanka and the Southeast Asia. And the tradition generally focuses on study of the main text. And if you read the text, basically it's Pali text. Pali is an old Hindu language, which I don't think that anybody uses this language today. And another one, that's the one we will focus, is Mahayana, which means great vehicle. Basically, we can call it East Asian Buddhism, Eastern Buddhism. And basics, it can, the major teach, it only exists in Chinese, okay, because Kumarajiva. So you derive from the Chinese Buddhism tradition, which goes developed during the Han, start from Han Dynasty and going on. And this tradition focuses on the teaching found in Mahayana Sutra, which are not considered as canonical or authoritative in Theravada, and preserved in the, majorly preserved in the Chinese Buddhist canon and in the classical Chinese language. So I doubt it today, sometimes you have Mahayana text, which is in Sanskrit. And I believe, it could be translated from Chinese back to Sanskrit, because the original Sanskrit probably lost. Okay, so the teaching has been preserved in the classical Chinese language, and there are many schools. And in the Mahayana Buddhism also have many schools and different traditions with different texts and different focus. So, for example, the Zen Buddhism, we're going to talk about next week, and the Pure Land, okay, or Flower Garden, which is focused on the Lotus Sutra. Okay, they all belong to the Mahayana Buddhism. Also include one popular in Japan called Nichiren, right? Also belong to Mahayana. And another one is so-called the Vajra vehicle or Vajrayana. Okay, it's or sometimes people call it the Mantrayana, tantric Buddhism, or historic basics is Tibetan. Okay, so you can call Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, and which developed certain from Eastern Asian Buddhism. Some people consider this school is part of Mahayana, but I think their tradition is different, so probably give a different name. So that's the three major schools we can talk about on the Buddhism. So before we move on, and let's have some. So James, you have a question?
Yeah, the question I have is, I've heard about great vehicle and small vehicle. Which one of these is the Theravada, the small vehicle?
Theravada is a small vehicle, okay? And I kind of not going to use this name, and then some scholars suggest that's the wrong name, because when Mahayana create, they call themselves big, great. So the other one is, of course, is small. So so it's not the name they will call themselves. They say that's the name people call it. And even in Xuanzang or in Feng Youlan's writing, I think he still called little vehicle, and which I think we should change it, in today's environment, just like, make it proper name. So any other question?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, sorry. These three different schools, they're in Chinese, or are they also exist in India?
Oh, okay. I would say it's international. Okay, it's international, because like in Thailand, basics is Theravada, and same as Sri Lanka. Okay, there's a Theravada. Okay, and the Mahayana is not only in China today, Japan, Korea, and Malaysia, or the East Asia, believe Mahayana Buddhism.
Right, and then in China, I guess in Chinese we all call this Fojiao Buddhism as a general category for all three.
Yes, I think so. So that's why, actually it's a lot of change, right? In Taiwan, I also realized a lot of Tibetan Buddhist monk become popular in certain trade, okay, put this way, professional trade, okay. So because I don't know what's the reason, okay, but basics, they mix together, so.
Yeah, I mean, from my little understanding, that actually all of them study the same sutra, right? It's just that the practice or the way they meditate or the way they learn is a little bit different.
The sutra is different, okay? So
sutra is different, okay.
Sutra is different. For example, okay, Tibetan Buddhism, they have their own tradition and they study their own sutra.
Okay. Sutra, okay.
And the same as Theravada, they have their own Pali canon text. Okay, the text is written in Pali, and Pali and the Sanskrit is very close. Okay, that's why sometimes you will see that spelling is slightly different. Usually Pali have an N at the end, and Sanskrit doesn't have an N at the end.
But I think all of them still share, like the major sutras. One of the major ones, like the Diamond Sutra, the Heart Sutra. I think they do still. There's some commonality to some of the sutras that they study, and then there are others that they diverge.
Yes, yeah. So that's why I put this one. The basics of Buddhism teaching, they are all the same. I believe in the Tibetan, they also believe the same thing. But just like Christian, right? When you branch out, and they have a new text coming out, and the old tradition will not recognize the new tradition. For example, Jewish religion will not recognize New Testament, but the Christian religion will recognize the Old Testament. This kind of situation.
Just one last quick question. The Zen school Buddhism actually is kind of a little bit of a gray area with the Tantric, with the Tibetan Buddhism. Is there an overlap there?
I don't think they have an overlap. I don't think they have an overlap. They're probably exclusive. Okay. So there's a story is when the Tibet is decide to have a religion, a Buddhism religion. They invite both Indian monk and Chinese monk who represent the Zen Buddhists, okay, to have a debate. And then they can decide which side they will go. Okay. And of course, you can see if you debate from Zen, right? Zen is silence. So for sure they are going to lose. So so that's why they do it in their way. So that's the story. So, we have a few hands up. Let's go just 1 minute. Okay, we have is it Phil?
Yes. You know, generally we think of Southeast Asia as Theravada, but what is Vietnam? I mean, what does it practice?
I believe Vietnam is Mahayana. Okay,
that's what I think too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one book I always want to introduce. Okay, Thich Nhat Hanh. Okay, he passed away. I don't know who heard about Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is a very famous, second most influential Buddhist monk.
He passed away earlier this year.
Yeah, January. Because at that time, I was thinking about have a section talk about him, but since I follow the Feng I think, okay, let's wait to the proper time. So I still debate whether or not I should introduce him. And this book, The Heart of the Buddha Teaching, I think this book is very good for as an introduction. So I'm thinking about whether or not I should include this one or to introduce Thich Nhat Hanh. He's Vietnamese. And I read this book, and I find out he has even he being considered as a Zen Buddhist and which belong to Mahayana. But I can see because his geographic location in Vietnam. So I do see a lot of Theravada flavor, but that's just my personal feeling. And some people will say, no, you misunderstand. So that's just me. You know, I feel he has a lot of Theravada flavor in his teaching. So that's just me. Okay. James, please.
I just had to mention, I just had to mention that the Tibetan Buddhists are so famous for their art and sound. Their sounds. They have all kinds of bells, actual tools like machines that make sound, and the meditation by the monks, combined monks, all in a very low tone. I think they also have a martial arts form. I'm not sure if that's them also. It might be that might be only in China.
I don't think so, but I could be wrong. But one thing one good movie is that's a very old movie called 7 Years in Tibet by Brad Pitt. Okay, and that's a good movie. Okay, so it talks about the young Dalai Lama. So I think that's a great movie.
I'm from Los Angeles, and people went nuts when that came out. People just went nuts, and everybody was going to Tibet and showing off their toys that they bought there and stuff. It was great.
Okay, so Tibetan is a little bit difficult, and then I hope one day I can find somebody can have a proper introduction on this subject. Okay, so Pin, please.
A quick question. So I thought, according to legend at least, Zen Buddhism was introduced by the Indian monk Dharma to China, right? So at least if you believe the legend, then Zen Buddhism really started in India and came to China.
Okay, I hope I can convince you today. Okay, that's wrong. Okay, so
sure.
Chinese also, we probably know, right? Chinese are also very good to fabric story, right? So after you have the great philosophy or teacher, right? Then you don't say I created. They say, 2,000 years ago, somebody make this one, and then that's the name. I give you all 27 names on that. So I hope I can convince you today. So. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, for next subject, we're going to give a quick introduction of Mahayana Buddhism. So when we talk about Mahayana Buddhism, and since there's another big question, okay, that's debatable, okay, in the scholarly debate on how does Buddhism religion disappear in India, right? There's a period of time around this time, about the second, third century. Buddhist is the most popular philosophy religion in India, but basically it's all gone, okay? And then especially Mahayana Buddhism, you have to go to China, read the classical Chinese texts, which mostly translated by Kumarajiva. So why is this disappear? That's a big question, and it's constantly debated. So before we go to the Mahayana Buddhism, the person is important is Nagarjuna. Okay, Nagarjuna in Chinese is called Long Su. Okay, Long Su Pusa. Okay, so he is I don't know if he is a monk or not, but basically he's a great philosopher, and a lot of study about him. So and his teaching become the key of Mahayana Buddhism. So first, the concept of Sunyata, okay, emptiness, which is not being focused in the Theravada, but it's in the Mahayana, is Sunyata, okay, the emptiness. Okay. And another thing, Feng Youlan's writing, he introduced on this one. So I just summarized as Nagarjuna's teaching, his philosophy. So he talked about two truths, which is relative truth and absolute truth. So relative truth is the truth in common sense, okay, for everybody to understand. And absolute truth is for the higher sense, I put this way. Okay. And he talked about the causality, which is being translated as yuan in Chinese. And then the proper word, the causality is not like Aristotelians A cause B as four causes, this kind of cause. Basically is talking about dependent origination. So basically he's talking about when A exists, B will exist. If A ceases to exist, B will ceases to exist. This kind of phenomenon. So it's a little bit different, but that's what he's talking about. Then he also talking about the relativity. So he talked about the big, the small. There's no absolute, right? As a big, as small. I think this is easy to understand. Another thing, we call him skepticism, okay? Because he's talking about the tetralemma, okay? Not that the dilemma, he talk about tetralemma. Okay, he talk about the situation could have four different situations. A can be true, or A can be false, or both A and not A, about A can be both true and false, or A can be neither true nor false. So this teaching leads to, he talk about the emptiness. And also we call it the middle way. That's the result he's talking about. And the middle way is important, okay? Even in the early Buddha teaching, the Shakyamuni, okay, Gautama Buddha, he also teach middle way. But Mahayana's middle way is so-called the Madhyamaka, okay, which is being taught by Nagarjuna and translated by Kumarajiva. So we have Joe at the hands up.
Yeah, going back to the, so does this essentially what you're talking about, something the equivalent of the law of excluded middle, where something is neither true or false?
Yeah, yes, but if in this way he rejects exclusive middle, right? In this way, he rejects exclusive middle because there's no exclusive middle. It could be true, could be false, could be both true and false, could be neither true nor false. That's what he's talking about.
Okay.
Actually,
okay.
we can find the equivalent Western philosophy here. I'm going to introduce quickly. Okay.
Anaxagoras.
Yeah.
Anaxagoras believed that.
Okay, we can talk about this one. Yeah. Okay.
It's in a book by Aristotle.
Already. Okay, that's great. Yeah. So let's back to Buddha's teaching, original teaching. Buddha's teaching about the middle way basically talk about the between two things. Okay. So you don't self-deny because at that time the Hinduism ascetic monk basically doing a lot of self-denying, and the royal family allows self-indulgence. So he kind of tried to avoid the two extremes. And then the view of reality, he also avoids the eternalism and annihilationism. Okay, so he tried to avoid two extremes. And then he also reject or resistant to unconditional accept of any extreme way of practical practical and theoretical viewpoint. So he is kind of like stay in the middle. Okay, that's Buddha's original Buddha's teaching in the middle way, more on the way of living. And Nagarjuna, okay, he's teaching about the Madhyamaka, okay, which also translates as middle path or middle way. Okay, in Chinese we call 中观, okay, observation. And he's talking about without relying on convention, the ultimate fruit is not taught. So you have to rely on convention and also rely on the ultimate, which is he's talking about nirvana. So without understanding the ultimate, which is nirvana will not attain. He's talking about the character is neither existent nor non-existent, nor both existent and non-existent, nor neither. And the centralist should be the true reality. And you want to be free from this four possibility, which is tetralemma. Okay, so with the cessation of ignorance, which is talk about 12 link of the dependent, codependent origination. So the formation can cease arise. So that's his religious teaching. Basically, you want to reach nirvana, you have to stop, cease the cessation of ignorance, because everything starts from ignorance. So this kind of teaching would be translated by Kumarajiva and written in the Chinese, classical Chinese writing, and that's become today's canon of Mahayana Buddhism. Pim, please.
So just trying to better understand the middle way. So growing up, I would hear about these famous monks that practice, I would say, extreme self-denial and led very, very parsimonious lives. And I was told that it's because human existence is really at the cost of other lives. Even if you're vegetarian, you're killing plants to sustain yourself. So is that, I think Hong Yi Fa Shi was a famous example. So is that against the middle way, or is that a different concept that they're not at odds?
Okay, I think it depends on where we stand for, right? We are living in today's luxury life. We will see them as ascetic monk, right? Even all the monks are ascetic. But if we look at the Buddha, Gautama's time, right? Talk about 2,500 years ago. And I think if we know, I think the Jainism, right? The Jainism practice even consider the plant have life, a rock has a feeling. So you have to be very careful. So their priests would be very, very much self-denial. And so if you look at the Buddha himself, when he tried to meditation, he has been like 7 days, not eating, not drinking, almost died. Okay, that's kind of extreme he's talking about. And until he got enlightened under the Buddha tree, so he started to eat. I think a girl bring the milk to him, and he realized, he should not go to extreme. So in today, we, like me, a meat eater, and you see vegetarian as ascetic, but for Buddha, he probably it's his middle way. So
thank you.
Alex, please.
Yeah, I actually never heard of this middle way. Do you know the translation in Chinese, the term middle way? 中观. 中观.
Guan means observation.
Right.
Okay.
And then also reading some of the sutras, right? My understanding also is that a lot of times it's a form of writing where they say, okay, you see this is what it is. And then it says, no, but it's really not what it is. It's a backward negation way of philosophy that you think you see something, you think you're doing this, you think you see Buddha, you think you might have done some, but actually it's in your mind and it's not really there. And when you say, okay, that if it's not really there, then what it is, and the answer is something else, negate it. So it's a philosophy that is very, for me, very kind of you present an issue, a problem. I wouldn't say problem, but then right straight away you're being refuted. Like, no, what you're thinking is actually not what you think. I've never. I mean, if I compare to Western philosophy, this is a very special type of way of, just in terms of writing, in terms of, explaining philosophy,
Yeah, I think the way of explain is very Chinese. Well, I don't know if it's a Chinese style or Indian style, but basics. I will introduce some today some text basics in this way. It's about the negation of negation of negation. So that's it. And then just back to the Western philosophy, I do James talk about Anaxagoras, but I'm thinking about this philosopher, okay, Sextus Empiricus, okay, almost around the same time as Nagarajiva, okay, Nagarjuna, okay, the same time as Nagarjuna, okay, and both, and then he talked about the suspension of judgment. Okay, so I think that's a very good book he talked about, and I don't see other Western philosopher had talking about this. He talking about, I hope I'm not biased or misread, but when I read this book, I find out it's very much like Nagarjuna's middle way, okay, or the middle way, okay, because he's talking about, he tried to, something you may see is ridiculous. He's trying to prove, okay, 3 times 3 is not equal to 6, something like this. And he tried to prove everything could be wrong. And his conclusion is you should be the attitude of your life, or to see everything should be suspension of judgment. And then the scholar believe, because Sextus Empiricus, he studied the Philo, the person, Pyrrho. Pyrrho is the person lived around 300 BC who traveled with Alexander the Great, and he settled, he visited India and then come back in the Greek. And that's why he brings this kind of philosophy back to Greek and to the Roman time. Sextus Empiricus, he is a physician, and he wrote this book. That's why I feel like, we can find the equivalent in Western tradition. Ron, please.
Yes, so Jason, in hearing this, I'm kind of like really appreciating when you have a paradox, it's like a dilemma.
Yeah.
How can it be and not be? That's a dilemma. And so like di means 2. So there's 2. Now all of a sudden, I've heard for the first time, instead of a dilemma, you have a tetralemma, 4.
Yeah.
In other words, not only is it's true and it's not true, but it's also, it's true and not true, and it's neither true and not true. So what I'm getting from this, and where I could see where it leads to Zen and fits in so nicely with Taoism, is the message is, if you think you know something, if you think you've pinned it down, if you think you understand it, you're totally wrong.
That's right.
It's way, way more, and that the message is that the mind, the intellect, the brain that we use to try to understand everything is just inadequate to deal with tetralemmas.
Yeah, thank you, Ram. Okay, so let's move on for the Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, besides the philosophical part, they have a religious part. Bodhisattva, okay, that's a new being being introduced in the Mahayana Buddhism. And Nagarjuna has been viewed as one of the Bodhisattva, okay. So Bodhisattva doesn't exist in the Theravada Buddhism, okay, but in the Tibetan Buddhism, they have the Bodhisattva. So in Mahayana Buddhism, a Bodhisattva refers to anyone, any being who has generated Bodhisattva, which means Bodhi. Bodhi means enlightenment or wisdom. Sitra means consciousness. Okay. Spontaneous with the compassionate mind. Compassionate is important, okay, to attain Buddhahood for the benefits of all sentient beings. Okay, so that's the key. That's why I call it Mahayana, means great vehicle, because they are not doing for yourself. They are doing for all the benefit of all sentient beings. Not all people, okay, all races people also include all the animals. So that's what he's talking about. And that's why Mahayana Buddhism like to call the Theravada as little vehicle, because they only take care of a small group of people. They are Mahayana taking care of all the people. So very much like the Jesus revolution. It's not talking about himself. It's talking about Savior, save all the people. Okay, everybody, not just Jews. So that's the kind of the revolution. And the Bodhisattva, original Theravada or Buddha teaching, Buddha never claimed he is God or he's spiritual or something. No, he just talking about, he just jumped out the samsara. So Bodhisattva become a kind of the God in today's point of view, okay, especially being borrowed from religious Taoism. So Bodhisattva totally become God-like beings. And important thing, they have the four immeasurable mind. Okay, so that's all Kumarajiva's translation. Okay, so called love, kindness, okay, and compassion, empathic, and equanimity. Okay, so that's the Buddha heart. And the important thing that if you read Lotus Sutra, that's the one introduced a lot of Bodhisattva. Okay. So there's many, nobody know how many Bodhisattva have. Okay, but I just want to introduce 5 important, and the one is Manjuri Bodhisattva. Okay, that's Bodhisattva of Wisdom. Okay. So he write on the things that I. And then another one is Siddhigarbha. Okay, Siddhigarbha is the earth source and being viewed as the Bodhisattva in charge of the hell, okay, like Hades. Okay. So this one you're probably familiar with. To go to a Chinese restaurant, okay, Maitreya, okay, the friendly Buddha. Okay, so basis in charge of the future world, the future world, the Buddha of the future world. And the Samantabhadra, okay, which is the universal worth, all good, okay, the high virtue of the Buddha. Okay. And this one is the most popular in the Mahayana Buddhism. Dalai Lama is the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. Okay. So popular name in Chinese is Guan Yin, and a lot of English translation just direct translate as Guan Yin. Okay, so that's but the original name is Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. Okay. So there's the Guan Yin or Guan Shi Yin. There's a story between disagreement. Xuanzang disagree what Kumarajiva's translation, his name. So that's the popular Bodhisattva, okay, Mahayana Buddhism. So that's, I think that's it for the yes. Okay, Pin, please.
So again, I'm not sure if I just confused about others. So I think when I was young, I heard stories that the Dizang Wang Pusa and Guan Shi Yin, they were actually ordinary human beings, right? And then achieved nirvana to become Bodhisattva. Is that how? Yes. Is that how it works? That you start as a human and you can become a Bodhisattva? And also, growing up, listening to the stories, I had the impression that these two were actually Chinese. At least these two were actually Chinese when they were ordinary humans. But I guess I'm wrong. Now listening to your lecture, that they were actually not Chinese when they were mundane humans. They were.
I don't think they are Chinese. They are Indian. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Avalokiteshvara introduced by Kumarajiva, and then when Xuanzang visited India, and he visited, I think his account of record of West Journey, not the book Journey to the West. I think Xuanzang's writing. He talked about the place he visited, okay, the statue of Avalokiteshvara, and Xuanzang totally disagreed on the translation Guan Yin Pusa, because he said, how can you observe the sun, okay, it's wrong. So if you read the Heart Sutra translated by Xuanzang, he called it 观自在菩萨. He means Avalokiteshvara doesn't mean observe the sun. This means free mind. Okay, that's his debate. So I try to ask people who know Sanskrit to explain, but I don't know. Nobody give me a right answer, satisfied answer. So that's the only thing I know. So I probably sure, and all this Bodhisattva has been written in the Lotus Sutra, which was translated by Kumarajiva. So I don't think Kumarajiva invented this Bodhisattva. I believe he translated from Sanskrit. So yeah, and then again, we probably have a lot of, for example, Guan Yin, right? Avalokiteshvara was a man, and then right now you probably see as a woman, right? So that's a totally being changed, and they all become Chinese like. So.
Yeah, thank you very much for clearing up my all of my confusions. Yeah, appreciate it.
It's just like when you read the Greek mythology, right? A lot of things doesn't make sense, right? Because sometimes how come his father and then become daughter? How come he has two different kinds of background? So so same thing. Phil, please.
Yeah, this is a confusing issue for me because Bodhisattva are beings that achieve Buddhahood, but they didn't go to Nirvana, at least yet.
They come back to serve you and me. Okay, they come back to serve you and me.
But they remain in order to help people.
Yes,
they're compassionate.
Yeah, because they are not going to stay in Nirvana until everybody is safe.
So, on one way of thinking is they are a kind of a spirit in a way, if you could call that a god, okay, but a spirit. So, on the one hand, they seem to be higher than Buddha because Buddha was just interested in attaining Buddhahood, right? These guys have achieved good Buddhahood, but they had a greater compassion for all of humanity. And so, if so, on the one hand, they are in some sense higher than Buddha, but on the other hand, they are not higher than Buddha because Buddha is the religion. Okay, so it's kind of confusing. It's a little bit like Jesus and the compassion and dying on the cross for us, okay, for humanity. In one sense, you could say he's higher in the sense of compassionately becoming a human and then dying for humanity. But on the other hand, you always have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You do not say the Son, the Father, and the Holy Spirit. I mean, so this is a little bit confusing about exactly what the hierarchy sequencing is, because on the one hand, it seems like they are higher, but on the other hand, they are absolutely also not higher. So
yeah, I think that's the same confusion. If you feel it's a confusion, and then Trinity could be the same kind of situation. So I think that let's put on this one because we will have more chance to discuss more detail on the religion or on the Buddhism in general. Okay, and then so we have another hand up. Yes, please.
Yeah, well, to me, it just seems to boil down to the claim by Buddha that he was not a god. Most Buddhists don't believe that Buddha is a god. So the idea that bodhisattvas have such a status doesn't exclude Buddha's mortality.
Yeah, so I think today being viewed as God. Remember, all these are Mahayana Buddhism, but you will see them in the religious Taoism temple, okay, especially Guan Yin. Okay, so basically it's kind of mixed. So probably the true Buddhists will not view them as God, but religious Taoists will see them as God. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
maybe it boils down to the tetralemma.
Well, if you're Buddhist, there should be no hierarchy, right? So it's not relevant.
I think one day we will talk about the Journey to the West, the novel. Okay, so that's also interesting part. You know, they have the ranking. Okay, just bureaucratic ranking because. Okay, so let's move on. Before we introduce the Kumarajiva, then introduce the. I think that's the part that a lot of people ask, you know, about the Silk Road. So let's talk about Silk Road a little bit. And during this time, the period of time here, let's remember, it's about 350 BC. Okay, that's 350 CE, the century. Okay, so the Chinese. Okay, let's do the Silk Road here. So here's China. Okay, from what's the place? Xi'an, Nanjing. So anyway, but that's China, and there is a road to Xi'an. Okay, I think that's Xi'an, and then that's the Silk Road all the way to. But during this time, since the Islamic religion hasn't started yet, so I don't think here has a connection. So basics, the major cultural, so-called Western world in Chinese is Indian, and Indian culture spread around in this area. So they are Indian-like culture, and they are Buddhism. Okay, so this city or state is called Kucha. In Chinese, they call Qiuci, Guizhi. I don't know what's the proper pronunciation, but should be called Kucha. That's the powerful state. So you look at the map, okay, Kingdom of Kucha. It's a kingdom from the 1st century to the 7th century when the Tang Dynasty arose. Then Tang Dynasty destroyed this state. And it's in today's Xinjiang, China. Okay, so it's on this side is so when we talk about the Wei War, that's the area we are talking about on the west border of China in today. Okay. And during that time, it's an ancient Buddhist kingdom, okay, located in the north branch of the Silk Road. Look at, if you think Silk Road, and at that time, Silk Road bases communicated with India, northern India. So there's a two route. Here is the desert, okay? So the road go north and the south. So the north route is Kucha. Okay? So it's a major city, major state. And Kucha is a Central Asian metropolis and was the most populous oasis in the Tarim Basin. Okay? So Kucha became very powerful and rich in the last quarter of the 4th century. And about to take over most of the trade along the Silk Road because the trade going there. And if you occupy the nice place, you can tax them and then you can become very rich. So if you look at the little bit political, okay, if you recall, okay, for last 3 sessions, we talk about Taoism, right? And then the political situation is, if you review, we have the warrior state, then we have a Han Dynasty for 400 years, then China break up, okay, for about 400 years. And the last a few sections, we talk about the Jin, we talk about Neo-Taoism, we talk about religious Taoism, which is on the southern part. At that time, China is many countries. So in the northern part, they also have many countries run by some tribe, 5 different tribe. Let me try the 5 tribe name. Okay, run by the tribe, right? And during that time, about 350 CE, the major dominant state is called formal Qin. And if you recall, we talk about the Neo-Taoism, Xuanxue. They have the famous battle of Fei River. That's the Qianqin, because he, the Fu Jian is the emperor. He unite all the tribe and built a powerful northern dynasty. And that's the time he claimed he has 1 million troops, want to cross the Yangtze River to annex, okay, the eastern Jin. And the prime minister, Xie Xuan, okay, we talk about this in when we talk about the 7 sage and the bamboo grove. He is the person who strategy or by luck, whatever reason, defeated Fujian. So the China split for the eastern Jin and the south, and Qin, we call it the Qian Qin, which will be try to separate from the Qin dynasty on the 200 BC. Okay. So this one we call Qian Qin. So these two, China has been split, the north and the south, and their culture are also different. In the south, the dominant philosophy is Neo-Taoism. And in the northern part, the major philosophy is Buddhism. So that's why, you know, we separate, become the 2 sections. We talk about Neo-Taoism, okay, for the southern part, and the Buddhism on the northern part. So here is become a state dominated by Buddhism. And the Fujian, the emperor, he also promote Buddhism. So that's why he is interested in Buddhism. So let's talk about Kucha. Okay, that's the writing from Xuanzang. When that is 200 years, 300 years after this time. So that's his description about the kingdom of Kucha. You can imagine what kind of state. He said the soil is suitable for rice and the grain. It's all in oasis. It produces grape, pomegranates, and numerous species of plum, pears, peach, and almonds. Sounds like the weather probably sounds like California. The ground is rich and minor gold, copper, iron, and lead, and tin. The air is soft. The manner of the people honest. The style of writing is Indian, with some differences. They excel other countries in their skill in playing on the lute and the pipe. So this country also famous for their dancing and the music, and a lot of Chinese music probably imported from Kucha. They clothe themselves with ornament, garment of silk and embroidery. There are about 100 convents in the country with 5,000 more discipline. It's a Buddhism state. Unlike today, it's an Islamic religion. But today, during that time, basically is Buddhism. Okay. This belongs to the little vehicle. That's Xuanzang's writing, and that's why I call it. I put it as Theravada of school. I don't know what that means, but basically that's one school of Theravada. Their doctrine and their rule of discipline are like those of India. They are those who read them, use the same origin. So basically their language is a Sanskrit type of language, about 40 miles. You know, there's two outside the Western Gate, there's the chief city and the right left. Okay, they have the great figure of Buddha, about 90 feet high. It's a very high Buddha statue. And I think today, before the Taliban destroyed, and I think you probably still can see the statue of Buddha. So that's about the state of Kucha. Phil, please.
Yeah, could I ask a question? This is more of a racial question in this sense. Right now, when I look at Xinjiang, the people do not look Asian or what you call Mongoloid, you know. But back in that time, during the Silk Road thing, when we're talking about, I'd always imagined before this that they were sort of like Mongolian-like. What was the racial makeup at that time like? Are they like, because right now in Xinjiang, it doesn't look anything like you know, like Chinese people at all. Even the Tibetans look kind of Chinese. They're not, but they look Asian in that sense. So could you explain, or do you know what the population was like?
I'm not expert on that, but I kind of interested in this part. So that's what I believe. Okay, so I believe this time during this area they are Indian. Okay, they are Indian culture. Okay, and this yellow area they are Turk. Okay, they're Turk. Okay, so we will talk about the Tang Dynasty later. Your Tang Dynasty basically their blood is Turkish blood. Because the Chinese general, they for generation, because they try to prevent the Turk invention. So the best way is marry their daughter. Okay, so they got the mix with the Turk. So that's the racial issue. And here, basically, they are Indian because if you look at the painting or the drawing during that time, they draw people. If the people with dark, okay, that's India. Okay, so Kumarajiva is dark. Okay, so it's Indian. Okay, and today you probably look like some have the blue eye, green eye, you know. Look, and I believe that's what I believe because later on for the Persian and on the east they come to this side. Okay, so they have the more Western like mixed together. So that's just my imagination or my best guess.
Can I just add a little bit quickly?
Yeah,
okay, of that region during that time. During the time of Kumarajiva, okay, that is a country of mainly Buddhism, and the surrounding countries, you know, they all have different dialect or what you call different language back then, and he was very smart. He was able to learn many languages around that area. So even though maybe the ethnicity would be similar, but the languages, they all have independent languages and maybe have their own independent culture. However short they were, even though in the end they were all conquered by the Chinese, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, I also like to add, even today, there's a great mixture of ethnicities in Xinjiang. Many of them will look what you would say East Asian. Some of them are more of the sub-Indian subcontinent. So there's a great mixture. It just happens so that in the US, the images that we see tend to, you see more of the more Caucasian ethnicities. And so that's been true throughout history in Xinjiang. And also just to point out that the Turkic people, they actually originated in the Xinjiang area, including those that eventually wound up in modern day Turkey.
Yeah, thank you, Pim. CK, please.
Yeah, I was going to ask another question, but I would like to sort of speak on what was just discussed. I think the original Turks were Mongoloids. Yeah. They were not Caucasian mix, because later on they became what they look like today due to the gradual absorption and conquest and integration of the peoples that they have conquered, especially during the Ottoman Sultanate era. But previously they were more Mongoloid looking, I believe.
Yeah,
yes. And for Xinjiang, I'm not really sure that it's, I mean, the facial features, because what you're saying, Jason, if they are dark skin, they must be Indian. Indians, the dark-skinned Indians were down to the south. You know, they were the Dravidians.
Oh no, I heard they described the picture. They just compare. They just try to distinct. Right? I think they do it dark. They try to distinct from non-Chinese and non-Chinese. You know.
Right, but the Indians that are really ruling so-called India at the time, where they were fair-skinned, they were Aryan-looking people, I believe.
That could be. Probably the Aryan at that time. Indian probably Aryan
Yeah, that's why they invented the so-called caste system, so that their rule can be legitimized and concretized forever, for eternity. So the Dravidians will be forever at the lower stratum of society. But that's not my question. I want to ask the description about Kucha by Xuanzang. Can you go back there?
Yeah.
So when he said the style of writing is Indian, what is the actual word he used? Because I don't think India exists as a concept.
Yeah, they say Fanwen. Okay, so basically, I believe Xuanzang is master in Sanskrit, and then I believe when we talk during this time, we don't know the race, what kind of race of people, but I believe Indian probably their major culture, right? Just like, you know, India never built a powerful empire like China. So, but their culture probably spread northward during that time.
So what is the actual word he used for this English word Indian? I'm sure he didn't say Hindu, right? It must be
Tianzhu.
Tianzhu, okay.
Tianzhu or Fanwen, I think. I didn't read this one in Chinese. Okay.
Right. So I guess, yeah, that's a bit of an interesting kind of translation confusion, because India is really a more like a Greek Greco-Roman concept.
Yeah, they call Tianzhu. They all call.
And Tianzhu doesn't cover all of India. I think it only covers a part of India.
Yeah, at that time they probably talk about northern part of India.
Yes. Yeah. So that's that's just the style of writing is probably Sanskrit, is what you're saying, right?
I believe it's Sanskrit.
Yeah.
During that time, yeah. And then Xuanzang is pretty good in Sanskrit. Yeah.
Right. Then India is also translated into Chinese sometimes as Shendu or Hindu, right? So
I think that's later time.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's my question, actually. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. So let's move on to Kumarajiva. Okay. The person. Okay. So story is a major story, but we have to start from his father. Okay. Kumarajiva's father, Kumarayana. Okay. So his father, Kumarayana, was Kashmiri. Okay. So he in the northern India. Okay. As belong to the highest Brahmin caste. He's the son of a high minister. And just like Buddha, Gautama Buddha, Kumarayana renounced his wealth and the social ranking and became famous Buddhist monk. And Kumarayana left Kashmir and to do the missionary, just like St. Paul. Left spread the teaching of Buddhism to the country. He wanted to go to China to preach, okay, to spread the Buddhism teaching. And of course, he had to follow the Silk Road. And then when he reached the king of Kucha, and then the king respecting Kumarayana's eminence and wisdom, and wanted him to discontinue his journey and stay in Kucha to become the royal priest. So Kumarayana was forced, okay, to marry the wisest woman in Kucha, who is the king's sister, Jivaka. So turned out Kumarayana hasn't had a chance to go to China. So turned out he has to stay and marry the princess and have a son. And of course, the son is Kumarajiva. So according to the legend, when Kumarayana married the Jivaka, when Jivaka was pregnant, all of a sudden she can speak Sanskrit, okay, from nowhere, okay, she just speaks Sanskrit, okay, and become much smart, knighted. And after Kumarajiva was born, she cannot speak Sanskrit anymore. Okay, so that shows the intelligence. Yeah, the intelligence of Kumarajiva. So when he reached 20 years old, Kumarajiva became the famous Buddhist scholar and known for his broad learning and the skill in debate. He's good in debate. So, okay, we'll talk about this later. So when he was 35 years old, remember Fujian is the emperor of former Qin. Okay, he is powerful. He promotes Buddhism. So he ordered his general Lu Guang. Okay, he said, "Send me Kumarajiva as soon as you conquer Kucha." So he sent his general to conquer Kucha in order to get Kumarajiva. That's how famous of Kumarajiva. And this advice given by Fujian's advisor, Daoan. But when at the 384 CE, when Kumarajiva was 40 years old, that's the story of another story, the history, the famous battle of Fei River. Fujian was defeated by Eastern Jin and the Southern Empire. So he kind of like not that powerful. So the Lu Guang become a warlord, and then he already catch Kumarajiva, but he don't want to send him back. He's so valuable, so he don't want to send him back. So he hold him in prison as a war booty. Okay, they want to sell him for higher price. That's what he want to do. And Lu Guang, unlike Fujian, he has no interest in Buddhism, so he just jail Kumarajiva. So during this period of time, Kumarajiva became familiar with Chinese language. Okay, he had been in jail for 17 years. So Kumarajiva also being forced to marry the princess of Kucha king. Okay, so he had to forced to give up his monk's vow. So, and then at the 394, okay, in the former Qin, okay, Fujian, that's the Fu family, the last name, and they have another Yao family overthrown, okay, the Fujian family. So the empire, the Northern Empire, become still called Qin, but the last name has been changed. Before was Fu family, but later on at this time become Yao family. And the Yao family defeated Lu Guang, okay? So he forced him to turn in, okay, Kumarajiva. So Kumarajiva, after 17 years in prison, at that time he already 57 years old. He has been sent from this area, to Xi'an. Okay, Xi'an is today's the Chang'an. Okay, that's it. And today terracotta. If you want to visit the Qin terracotta soldier, okay, so you can go over there. So Kumarajiva started his translation work for 12 years, and when he reached 69 years old, he died in Chang'an, and also today's Xi'an. According to the legend, after he died, all the Buddhist monk die, you burn it, and then they have something. Only thing not burned is his tongue. Okay, so that's how smart, how talented he can speak. So okay, that's why I think his tongue still left. I think.
Yes, I heard it's in Japan.
Is it in Japan? Okay.
Yeah, in Japan.
Yeah, his tongue's still there. Okay, so that's how smart how talented he is. So most of our Buddhism sutra we read today, okay, in China are translated by Kumarajiva. Xuanzang usually make another translation, but their style is different. And Xuanzang is more famous in his name, but his translation is only being studied in the expert, okay, but not in general. So whenever today you read the Chinese Buddhism Sutra, they all translated by Kumarajiva. So that's how important here. So I just list some of them, like Lotus Sutra and Diamond Sutra. I think Alex also have interest to introduce this, the one he translated. This one. And he just a little bit. Alex, you have something to say? No.
Sorry, I want you to finish, and I'll say something else.
Okay, all right. Okay, no problem. Okay, so so that's the sutta being transcribed by both usually. Okay, so basically, okay, so Xuanzang 200 years later also made the translation, and their style is different. Okay, let me just briefly talk about their different. Kumarajiva basically read the Sanskrit text, and he also familiar with the Chinese language, and then he based on the meaning and make a Chinese writing in the Chinese based on his understanding. And there's another, of course, you can see how difficult, even we translate Chinese to English, English to Chinese, and a lot of words you cannot find similar. So he will do his best to translate. And another big problem, I don't know, have ever you read the Pali Sutra, okay, the Theravada text. The Indian writing is, I just have to say, is terrible. It's keep repeating, okay? So for example, I remember one day you read is the disciple want to ask question to Buddha. So the disciple start to think about, okay, they have 5 different to do it. The first one is second one, so how to do it on the 5th way. So he asked Buddha. So the sutra is writing what the disciple think. And then he stand up, he talked to Buddha and they say, I have a question. Okay, there's 5 different ways. The first one is this, the second one is the 5th one is this. How can I do on the 5th one? And the Buddha say, since they have 5 different ones, first one is this, second one, the 5th one, you should do this way. So the same text being repeated many times. And then he want to ask the 6 different methods. Then he say, okay, they have the 6 different methods. The first 5 is this, and repeat one more time. So when you read this kind of text, you feel like it's page and page, and they all talk about the same thing. Only 1 or 2 sentences are different. That's the difficult part. I experienced this, and Kumarajiva talked about this, and he simplified this part. And I think that's his great contribution. Even when you read today's Diamond Sutra, sometimes I also complain, like a lot of repetition. But I believe the original one probably even worse. That's his translation. And Xuanzang's translation is a little bit different, which is if you are in my Dao De Jing reading or Confucius Analect reading, I do my own translation. I'm more on the Xuanzang kind of translation. Xuanzang is doing the word by word. He tried to make sure do his best one to each one. So the language could be a little bit difficult, but more accurate. Okay, that's the 2 different styles. So that's why we will call Kumarajiva's translation as Chinese Buddhism. Basically, it's become Chinese. And Xuanzang's translation, basically, you can call it Buddhism in China because it preserved the original word or meaning in Sanskrit text. So there is one writing from Feng in chapter 1. He talked about the Kumarajiva, the 5th century AD. It's one of the great translators of Buddhism texts in Chinese, said that the work of translation is just like chewing food that is to be fed to others. If one cannot chew the food oneself, one has to give food that has already been chewed. And after an operation, however, the food is bound to be poorer in taste and flavor than the original. So basically, you lost the flavor. But unfortunately, if you have no teeth, then that's the only way you can do. So that's how Kumarajiva doing the translation and the importance of this. So Alex.
Actually have a little different view than you. I guess everybody will have different preference.
Yeah.
The reason why Kumarajiva is so his translation of Diamond Sutra, which I'm planning to do an in-depth discussion later this year, because I'm a fan of Diamond Sutra. I think it's great, and his translation is important in many levels. First of all, he is a linguist. He knows so many different languages, and he is able to draw the essence of these different languages and be able to translate Diamond Sutra. And why is his translations is the most popular, and I personally think it's better than Xuanzang, is because he was able to use very simple words, simple to understand, because Buddhism is all about, just like every religion, right? Just like you said previously, to want to save the general population. It's not really to doctrinize, like Christianity, idolize somebody. They want to salvation. They want to spread salvation. So, the people back then were not as educated as other people. Most people are just commoners. Workers. So, in order to really spread the words, you have to use the simplest way to describe. But then what is amazing about his translations is that he still did not lose the essence of the Diamond Sutra, that he was able to use very simple words and then to describe something very deep and profound, okay? And the way he translated, I like it because it's almost like a play. If anybody have read a little bit about the Diamond Sutra, it's basically a gathering, and people, there's a dialogue between the Buddha and the monk, questioning about many things. So that's why his version became the best version, and also, well, in many people's mind, the best version, and also the easiest way to assess the essence and about life and the reflection of life. And that's, and that is why, it was so popular back then in the Tang Dynasty that people would print it, just to give away for free for other people to read, and that, as a form of spreading salvation. And also the other invention that he did with the Diamond Sutra is the fact that he understands Chinese language so well that he actually wrote it in the format of Confucian a book of poems, like the rhythm. Chinese poetry has a rhythm to it. He understands the rhythm. He understands how to create that rhythm. So it's easy to understand, easy to remember. And even though, yeah, you said it's repetitive, but that's what Diamond Sutra is about. It's about the same thing, but many different perspectives. So it seems a little bit repetitive, but it actually is, answering from a little bit different aspect, different angles. So his invention of this type of translation. Also, he did not translate. He translated many. He invented. He direct translated. He transliterated. Let's say Bodhi. He didn't say the wisdom in Chinese. He just say Bodhi, right? He did, and that is his invention. So ever since then, people would translate the wisdom of the Buddha as the Bodhi, and not a direct translation. And that was actually easier to people to understand that you don't. Some things would lose in translation if you translate it directly into another language. It's almost, you would take the essence of, so his invention of combining Chinese language, the poetry aspect of the Chinese language, as well as the original word of the Buddha, combine the two is a great invention. Yeah, that's. And
I thank you, Alex. And I totally agree with you. I have nothing to disagree. Okay, first about repetition. What I'm talking about is the original. I believe Kumarajiva talk about he has reduced the repetition because the original text even more repetition than Kumarajiva's translation. And I am not denied, okay, Kumarajiva's translation is much, much better, okay. But
yeah,
what
but the thing is, it will be interesting to kind of look at both translations.
Yeah, I try to look at, and Xuanzang translation is hard to read.
It's more theoretical. It's for scholars. Yeah.
I talk about is myself. When I translate analects, I do in Xuanzang's style.
Oh, wow.
Because the reason is this, I don't have the talent of Kumarajiva. You need a great talent to do it.
Yes.
So I know my mom doesn't speak English when she was pregnant. So so I don't have this kind of talent. So okay. So that's the story. Okay. So let's move on. Then we should talk about, because I still need to convince Pin about the Chan Buddhism is originated from China, not from India. So that's one of my tasks. So okay, so let me quickly introduce a few Kumarajiva's students, because he translates, and then he has a few students, which he also introduced in Feng Youlan's book. And each of these would be require a lot of time to explain and Vedantic. So let me just summarize two important of his students. And then I'm going to move to another person called Xie Lingyun. Okay, so Seng Zhao, okay, is one of, they all live very short. They die at 30 something. Okay, so his writing is very difficult to read, but basic. He's talking about 不真空论, which he interpret empty as unreality. Okay, so he said unreal is empty. So that is talking about there's no real unreality. Okay, that's the first thing he talked about. And he talked about another thing called on the immutability of things, which he very similar to what David Hume is talking about. You cannot, he talking about I look like the man of the past, but I'm not he. Okay, so you don't, the moment to moment, the time, the thing doesn't, when the time move on, the thing doesn't move with the time. That's one part about empty, okay, the emptiness, that's his argument. Another one is about the prajna, okay, the banro, okay, the wisdom, okay, the high wisdom, the transcendent wisdom. Pra means transcendent, and pra means transcendental, and shna means wisdom. So to talk about the prajna is not knowledge, and talk about nirvana is cannot be known. So that's his argument on this. And then Dao Sheng is another student. Okay, so he talked about the two truths. Okay, and he started to introduce so-called Buddhahood. Okay, so everyone have Buddhahood, and he started to argue the famous, when we talk about the when one sees Buddha, one is not seeing Buddha. When one sees there is no Buddha, one is really seeing the Buddha. Okay, so he talked about on the Dharma body is unseen. The real Buddha you cannot see. If you see, that's not real Buddha. That's he talked about. And the same logic, he talked about the Pure Land is for Buddha, and the word of Buddha is here. Okay, not the Pure Land, and the Pure Land is here. This kind of the argument he's talking about. So, but the reason I like to move on is about the Xie Lingyun. Okay, he has been famous. If you're familiar with Chinese literature tradition, he is famous for his poem. Okay, he's famous. People call him the landscape. Landscape. Okay, landscape poet. Okay, focus on the mountain and the streams. And unlike Wang Wei, right? That's another one called the field and the garden. Okay, or Tao Yuanmin that time. Okay, so that's a different landscape poetry. He's the originator for the mountain and the stream. So he's famous on his literature, famous point. Okay, I think most of people with Chinese traditional education will know him and read some of his writing. But he also has a great contribution in the Buddhism, and that's the part I want to link to Zen Buddhism. So he's from the southern part. Remember we talked about the map, the North China, Northern China, and the South China. South China we introduced 2 weeks ago, talk about Neo-Taoism. And the Northern China, that's the Buddhism teaching. And then Kumarajiva is in Xi'an, which is in the Northern China. And Zhao Sheng and Dao Sheng both are in the Northern China. And Xie Lingyun actually is from the Southern China, the Eastern Jin. Okay, so look at his family. Okay, so his maternal, okay, during that time in the southern part, because they are migrate, they are refugees from north. So it's important of your last name. So if your last name is prominent, you will always get a good job. So Xie Lingyun, his last name is Xie. So his paternal grandfather is Xie Xuan, okay, who is the one defeated Fu Jian, so the prime minister. And his mother, also important, is Wang, okay, Wang family. His maternal grandmother, okay, was the daughter of Wang Xizhi, okay, which I believe Alex is going to introduce his writing, his calligraphy, right? So Wang Xizhi's daughter is Xie Lingyun's maternal grandmother. So you can see he has been received the best of the best family education. So he's good in literature. And he also good in his Buddhism. He's important in Buddhism. So we introduced about Xuan Xue because he is from the southern part. So he is the expert on Xuan Xue, okay, which you also call the Neo-Taoism. Okay, so that's his background. And then he also good at the Qingtan, so-called pure conversation. So I think we introduced on this one 2 weeks ago. That's his background. And then, so you can think about this person. He has a wonderful family background, great education, and he is good in the Neo-Taoism training, good in the so-called Qingtan or pure conversation. Okay, so this kind of background, and he also learned the Buddhism teaching from the North. So you can see this combination, and people collect his Buddhist writing as so-called 辩中论. And excuse me, I didn't find the right translation, so I translate as discourses on the tenets of Buddhism. So over this one, he proposed, he started to write. He may not be the person who created this idea, and then he could be the person correct and write down this kind of idea. So if you look at this writing, okay, the concept he talked about is what they call 顿悟, and we call the flash of insight, or so-called sudden enlightenment. And he also a famous writing about the compromising between Buddhism and Confucianism, 折中孔氏 的 film. And he talked about the argumentation of Taoism, the discourse of obtaining meaning. Okay, so he talked about the sage embodies nothingness. So he kind of combined the Confucian sage concept with nothingness because they already reached the level of nothingness. And this one will be very Taoism thinking. He talked about when one gets the meaning, the words can be forgotten. So basically the word, he's talking about the wordless teaching. Okay, so he started to bring some important concept, talking about being and non-being, language and the meaning, what's the meaning of learning and enlightenment, which means learning is gradual understanding and the sudden understanding. This concept he started to write it. So he talked about the sage grasping embody of the concept of nothing and become the ultimate meaning of 顿悟, which is the sudden enlightenment, while learning and the cultivation will simply temper. So talk about learning and the cultivation, just simply the temporary tool to the end. And so I think he has one example is if you, because he is the great poet on the landscape, okay, poetry. Okay, so and he specialized in the so-called the mountain and the stream. So I heard he liked to climb mountain. Okay, he's a mountain climber. So that's why he got this idea. He had to walk, you know, keep climbing and climbing. That's kind of the gradual learning, all right, gradual understand. But to the top, you want to cross the other side. If you have deep valley or gulf, you have to jump over. That's the sudden understanding. So you have to move and move as a temporary tool to the end. Then the final point, you have to jump. That's the sudden understanding, sudden enlightenment, we call 顿悟. That's the concept he bring up. And he also start to discuss so-called 心 is my heart, and what's the principle behind the Buddhahood, the principle, this kind of thing. And he put the concept of actualization, actualization, which is so-called fulfilling and reaching the limit, which is very Confucius concept. And the forgetfulness, okay, that's the Taoism concept. So if you learn to the limit, reach your limit, then you will forget what you, not what you have learned, but all the process or the tool. That's just like when one gets the meaning, the words can be forgotten. Okay, this kind of reach the limit and forget it, this kind of concept. He bring up this kind of concept. So you can see he start to, because of his background, academic background, he's able to combine the Taoism, Confucianism, and the Buddhism together. And that's he bring up. So let me quickly finish so we can have a few minutes of discussion. So, so basically that's I want to talk about the influence of the Kumarajiva and how important of this one. So you can see, if you look at the grand scheme of the history of the Chinese philosophy, in the warring state, let's say 300 BC, I just put the rough time. We have a 6th school or one called the 100 school. And to the Han Dynasty, okay, which is about 400 years from 200 BC to 200 CE, we call it, they talk about heaven, right? Mystical Confucianism, okay, Dong Zhongshu's thinking. Then to the end of Han Dynasty, people become more and more religious and they have the mystical thinking. So so after that time, you know, we have the southern China and the northern China. The southern China is near Taoism, and northern China is more on the Chinese Buddhism. Okay. So if you see this Chinese Buddhism, then the concept Xie Lingyun bring up, right? You will see in Tang Dynasty, they start have the Zen Buddhism developed, and his idea of the principle that will become starting of and the Buddhahood, right? They become the concept of the principle become the Neo-Confucianism in the Song Dynasty, which is most famous person is Zhu Xi. And to the Ming Dynasty, another school of Neo-Confucianism come out, which based on the Buddhahood and the mind-heart concept. So you will see this Indian, or you want to call him Indian or Kuchen. Okay. So he went to China and make the translation. He created the Chinese Buddhism, which has a further influence for the Zen Buddhism and the Neo-Confucianism and the mind-heart school of that. And the final part I talk about is one of the important feature Kumarajiva bring in is Chinese language. According to some account, probably 30% I don't know that how do they count, but actually it's a lot. For the person who speaks Chinese, you probably will agree. Many words actually is from, at least from Chinese Buddhism. Okay, I just list some of them. Like even we say today, okay, convenience, okay, the chance, okay, or the fate, okay, or you want to talk about it, and the causation, consequence, even winning, okay, as you like. These all Buddhism like language and translated in the Chinese Buddhism by Kumarajiva. So I think we will stop here, and then I hope it's not too rushed to the end part, but basics we will talk about Zen Buddhism next week, so we will have more time to discuss. So let's pause for a few minutes, 10 minutes to discussion. And before you raise your hand, I want to ask Pin, do I convince you about the Zen Buddhism is from China, not from India?
Yes, you have, but I'll be a smart aleck and say there's no real unreality. So
yeah, that's right.
You've convinced me and you have not convinced me at the same time.
Yeah, that's a story. Okay, so that's great. Not to believe whatever we want to believe. So, Alina, please.
Yes, my question is, you've just covered or say mentioned the concept. So once you reach the ultimate, or say you've reached some kind of highest level, you forget the ways you reached it, the point. You forgot, you're forgetting all the tools and the way how you get there. Is that what you've been meaning, or it's something that it's my take on that?
That's what I meant, and that's what the Zen Buddhism is going to talk about. Okay, so that's why when they are teaching, they don't write, they don't teach you to read. Okay, because whatever you read, it just help you to certain point. The last point you have to jump over. Okay, so when you jump over, the tool, actually the tool is not going to help you jump over. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll discussing on this one next week.
Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome. Alex, please.
Actually, this is a comment to Pin. What I know is that how it got to Japan, how Zen got popular was during the Tang Dynasty. They invited a group of Japanese students from Japan, of course, to the court to study Buddhism and many other literatures, because back then, Tang Dynasty, there was a lot of cultural exchanges, and Japan being far behind in this regard, they went to the Tang, they were invited to the Tang court to study, and that's why when they studied Buddhism during the Tang Dynasty and brought it back to Japan, you know, they took away the Chan school of Buddhism, and that's how, you know, it got a lot more popular in Japan. So yes, I believe Chan Buddhism is a school of Chinese Buddhism that, you know, is, so I would agree with Jason. I started in China, and especially popularized during Tang Dynasty. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at Xie Lingyin's 辩中论, discourses on the tenet of Buddhism, it's a lot of flavor of Zen Buddhism, and at that time Zen Buddhism haven't started yet, you know, and it's really popular, you know.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the info, Alex. But my original point was there was a legend in China that Zen Buddhism came from India. So it wasn't the question about Japan. It was about whether it was indigenous in China or it actually originally came from India. But I do agree with what Jason presented makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
All right, thank you. That's the only purpose I make this presentation to convince you. So. Phil, please.
Yeah, my question is the mystery of Buddhism being lost in India, where originally it came from. And my thought is like, is it because India was crowded with so many religions that it really, in a sense, is hard to compete in such a crowded market, so to speak? Or was it because it's sort of, how should I say, exporting, you know, a kind of almost missionary spirit to other things allowed to survive, and therefore, in a sense, paying less attention to India, surviving in the new lands, you could call it, if I want to use that as a pun, new lands both in Southeast Asia and into China and then East Asia. Because it's lucky that it did survive, because in India, well, in India is not forgotten. It's just sort of incorporated partly into the multi-religion, but it's not distinct in its own form. So I just wondered, that's a great mystery, that it just seems interesting, was the export of it, the cause of the effect of it not surviving in India.
Yeah, I hope that we have some Indian experts here, you know, but I think that's a big mystery. And there's one theory I try to understand. One theory is later on, for sure it's popular, because when Xuan Zhang's writing, he talked about he went to probably the world's first largest university, so-called the Nalanda School. Okay, so that's all full of Mahayana Buddhist monk. So he talked about have thousands of monks. They study all kinds of subjects. They debate over there, and he turned out to become a professor over there. So it could, if Xuan Zhang's writing is true, let's assume it's true. It was very popular there, but why it's disappeared? So it's a mystery. And some people talk about because of foreign invasion later, and then kind of bring in and build the caste system, and then blah, blah. And another person talk about being just like a field talk about probably incorporate to the Hinduism, or you know they find out it's useless, you know, to live, you know. So we don't know. CK, please.
Yes, I have a personal story to tell. I mean, I just want to know what your thoughts on this. When I was 15, I was forced to study in the school Buddhism, which was
who forced you to study?
Well, because it's part of the curriculum. I guess I could choose between Confucianism, Buddhism, and Christianity or Islam.
Can I ask you where you study?
I studied in Singapore at the time.
Oh, okay.
So you had to choose one of them. I would rather go out and play than study these esoteric subjects. But at the time, I decided that, you know, I chose Buddhism, okay. And I often fell asleep during the class because it was extremely boring, and the concepts were flabbergasting, and the teacher was not very inspiring. So I spent my time daydreaming most of the time. And then for some reason, I became rather philosophical at one point, and I asked the teacher, since you talk about emptiness, you know, it was given in Chinese at the time, the course. Yes, I said, is this concept of emptiness eternal? Right? Like in Chinese, I actually asked the question, 空是否是永恒的? Yeah. Then the teacher basically changed the subject and refused to answer. And so up till today, I'm wondering I mean, is this whole concept part of Mahayana Buddhism, right? This question itself seems to arise from what I learned from you, from the Mahayana tradition.
Well, I try not to teach, but I hope I think you should feel lucky, you know, your teacher is not a Zen Buddhist. Otherwise, he slap you and kick you, and that's a way of his teaching. So we'll talk about next week. Ron, please.
Yeah, I would say, if I could, as brief as possible, that in listening to all of these teachings, I see a thread that's not different in any of these. If you start with the ancient Vedas and they talk about Nirguna Brahman, the absolute without qualities, and then you go to China and you get the emptiness. Sounds a lot like, the absolute with no qualities. And then you go to Taoism and you say that emptiness without qualities, you can't name it because it has no qualities. So that we're also talking about the same thing. And then you go to Zen, and of course, Zen, anything you name is not it. So once you understand that they're all of these great civilizations were basically talking about the same thing and just trying to explain it in the context of the time and place that was relevant. And as somebody said ordinary people could also have a chance. And once you understand that essential truth that they're all getting across, and you flip over to the West and you look at Neoplatonism, you look at the pre-Socratics and so forth, and you look at the Christian mystics, you say, oh my God, they were also talking about that same thing. And I think that's what, the more you study, if you, you let all the details and the distinctions drop off, you'll see that they're all talking about the one, which is unnameable, unspeakable, etc., etc.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. Actually, I feel the same way, actually. So, and actually another part of me, I was very interested in ancient Greek Roman philosophy, and it can, from time to time, you see the similarity, and that's the interest part, personal interest. Yeah. Thank you. Alex.
Yeah, I think Chinese Buddhism is not just about emptiness, it's about much more. Okay, but anyway, I actually would like to invite Dan in this group because he's been very vocal in the chat, and he is, I was wondering, Dan, if you would be interested to say something about your Tibetan Buddhist experience and why you felt the way you felt now. I think it would be really interested to hear.
Sorry, Dan, I didn't see your chat, so please,
Oh, you're missing a lot.
I didn't see it.
I was interested in this event because although I've been a student and a practitioner of Vajrayana Buddhism, and in particular Dzogchen, for 20 years, I know almost nothing about Chinese Buddhism, Chan, Zen, or Taoism. And so when I saw the event on Meetup, and it turned out that I already had the book, I was very interested in learning about Chinese Buddhism. And I very much enjoyed the chapter and your presentation. So thank you very much.
Then since you know the Tibetan Buddhism, can you contact me if you are interested in to talk about Tibetan?
Sure, Buddhism? we can reach out to one another on Meetup.
Yeah, so can you send a message to me and the Meetup messaging?
I will.
Yeah, please. Thank you. Yeah, I personally try to study, and it's so complex.
It is very complex. You've
very,
got
very
four major schools, and they have very different approaches to Tantra, and yet what I find wonderful is at the very highest levels, all the complexity disappears, and so that's why I want to learn more about Chan, because as I understand it, the very highest levels of Buddhist Tantras are very similar to Chan.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Please contact me, and we will be very, very proud to have you.
Thank you so much.
I'm so sorry, Dan. I just want to trouble one quick question. I know
Sure.
you mentioned in the chat that you still, even though you're no longer a Tibetan Buddhist practicing, but you still do the meditation, right? So
that's correct.
I'm wondering what kind of meditation that you do.
I practice Dzogchen. Are you familiar with it?
No.
Let's take this one offline. And
Okay.
It's a bit of an elaborate answer.
Yeah, probably you want to send a private message to.
Okay.
Yeah. So you know.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thank you very much for this one. And anybody, just again, not only Dan or Alex, you know, if you have a subject that you are interested, but nobody expert, like I'm not expert, you just have interest to learn, and you can make a presentation or discussion. And from time to time, the people who know will correct you. And that's the wonderful part to host this one, because you try to present what you know, and the people who know better will correct you, you know. I think that's the life, and you learn a lot. James, probably you have a final word, please.
I just wanted to say, even though I haven't meditated for years and worship nothing, I'm delivering a talk on religious logic at the Existentialist Society in Australia on September 9th. It's going to be advertised at several groups, so you can all come and hear me speak on it.
Can you put a link to the chat so people will know?
Sure. Okay. Let's see if I can get that.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And then I would like to say is, okay, final word about next week. We will talk about Zen Buddhism, and that's included in the Feng Youlan's writing. And there seems a lot of people are interested in the Buddhism, but I try not to last too long. I know somebody definitely not interested in Buddhism. So, so I will run a few 2-3 weeks, and then we will move to the Tang Dynasty.
So next week you also talk about Damo, is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. We'll talk about Damo. Yes. Okay. Okay. So one thing, final words about the Kumarajiva, I forgot. His translation actually personally, I feel he brings a lot of energy to Chinese language, because I read, I don't know, Pim is thinking the same way or not, because the ancient Chinese text and the text after Buddhism is very different. I can feel the energy, and then also contribute a lot to the popular education, because the common people are able to read. There's something to read. Otherwise, you have to read the classic. Yeah. So I think that's his great contribution. Anyway, thank you, everyone. Have a nice weekend, and see you next week. Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Great presentation.
All right,
thank
see you next week. Yeah.